Hello, and welcome to this Skill Me Up Live expert talk on how to transform an organization for agile IT delivery. My name is Jonathan Tuliani. I'm the European Managing Director for Opsagility. We are the Agile training experts behind skillmeup.com. Prior to joining Opsagility, I spent nearly 10 years in Microsoft, most of which was in the Azure product group, where I was a program manager for various services in the networking team. I also contributed to a range of Azure features, and I am the author of the exam reference guide for the AZ-103 Azure Administrator exam. I'm also a Microsoft certified trainer. We offer a number of training services in the cloud space. So for instructor-led training, have a look at opsagility.com. We have expert instructors for virtual or on-site delivery across the whole of the Microsoft official curriculum in the cloud space, and also custom and advanced classes going beyond the official curriculum. This includes interactive workshops, hackathons, and all taught by our world-class expert instructors. And then on the online side, we have skillmeup.com, where you have in-depth expert videos and hundreds of hands-on labs, again taught by live instructors who are experts in their field, and we offer certification pads and much more beyond. So you can have unlimited access on individual, team, or enterprise subscriptions. And to start a free trial, take a look at skillmeup.com. We're also doing a lot of work in the virtual conference space with our virtual conference manager platform. We have multi-day, multi-track, and multi-session conferences that can support breakout groups and workshops, assigning coaches, interactive networking, expo halls, you name it. Every feature that you can imagine on a traditional conference, we can support in a virtual format. We can also support hybrid events that combine an on-site element and a virtual element. So these, of course, are being driven by the current COVID crisis, but I think beyond COVID, as we look to a new normal, we'll see an increasing number of virtual conferences, and we have a great capability here. This is all built on top of Microsoft Teams, which gives it a very secure and stable platform for the conferences themselves. So for this talk, we're going to talk first of all about the cloud and agile, and why the cloud and agile really go together so well, why agile processes are so important to getting good value from the cloud. We're then going to look at just what is DevOps and agile delivery, and we're then going to look at how you can build agile DevOps teams within your organization. So let's move ahead. So I've been doing a series of talks on business aspects of cloud adoption, thinking about culture change and the value proposition of the cloud and so on. And one of the things that we've talked about, and this is a slide from one of those earlier talks, one of the things we've talked about is the cloud value proposition. And there's a series of different benefits people look for from the cloud, and not every benefit is relevant to every organization. Some people are looking at cost optimizations or transparency changing. Some people are looking at service quality issues around scalability and performance and reliability. Some people are looking at new capabilities for data analytics or machine learning or global reach. But a common driver is agility. It's this idea that with the speed of the cloud, people can innovate faster. They can move their products and processes and services forward faster, whether they're internal or whether they're customer facing. And as a result, they can deliver more value for their customers. They can have faster time to market. They can get ahead of their competition. And while the cloud enables you to provision your IT much faster than traditional IT, of course, you can provision in the cloud in seconds or minutes rather than weeks or months. If you execute your IT processes with the same processes you used on legacy IT, then you won't get the value of the agility that the cloud has the potential to deliver. If you're using legacy processes, then you're still going to be running at the old pre-cloud speed. So really, to get the benefit from the cloud, you really have to embrace modern agile ways of working that enable your processes to get the maximum advantage out of the agility that the cloud has the potential to offer. So that is the way that you leverage this second pillar. So while the cloud provides the technology, you're going to need the techniques we talk about today to really take advantage and turn that into a reality. Now, what do we mean by agile development? There are a number of principles that underpin this idea. Now, I won't read every word on the slide, but the idea of agile development is really not just a set of, a fixed way of working. It's a it's much more of a principle, a mindset, a methodology that you can apply across various ranges of individual processes. So the key element of agile development is this idea that it's about continuous change, continuous delivery, continuously learning and bringing that learning back to the product and delivering in these small, iterative, continuous cycles. Now, in order to do that, you want to be working with small cycles and fast-moving teams that can ideally release code on a very frequent basis, maybe weekly, maybe even daily. I've seen talks from Yammer where they were moving from daily releases to twice daily releases because once daily wasn't agile enough. But the idea is that you're moving towards an iterative model, and this requires business and development teams to work much more closely together. It requires a recognition that requirements will change and that setting a fixed set of requirements and then a huge waterfall project lifecycle, it simply isn't realistic. It requires managers to be more flexible about how they think about schedules and to think about concepts such as feature velocity rather than just hard deadlines that might be 6 months away that realistically aren't based on any kind of practical measure of what is actually achievable. So it's about thinking differently. It's about working in a very different way. Think of it this way: if you were going to sail a ship from Ireland over to New York, you're like the Titanic, and you're setting off to sail across to New York across the Atlantic. If you're dealing with a waterfall process, it's like spending a week carefully lining up your ship so that it points exactly at New York, then turning on the engines and closing your eyes and thinking that, okay, we pointed the ship at New York, of course it's going to arrive in New York in 3 weeks' time. Whereas with an agile process, it's about having your eyes open. It's about looking out of the window of the ship, and when a wave comes along, when the wind pushes you one way, you correct the ship and you steer it back the other way again. You're continuously adjusting your plan as you move forward. So you're course correcting, you're able to adapt to the changing reality as maybe the wind blows one way or the other. And that's really what agile is about. That's why you have this idea of iterative development. This is why you're trying to do things in these small cycles so that you can adapt to reality and adapt to changing circumstances as you go along. And the idea of continually shipping to production is really all about avoiding technical debt. It's about keeping people honest. If you're shipping to production, things have to actually be done. Whereas when you don't ship to production, what happens is people get things mostly done, but there's always some lingering pieces that haven't been fully completed. So maybe the testing wasn't completed, or maybe there's some bugs that you punted on. You haven't got that agility. You haven't driven it all the way through. So you're building up technical debt. You're getting things mostly done. Shipping to production is a forcing function to actually get things fully done before you go on to the next thing, and it's a very healthy discipline, and it's really the only way to make that happen. It also means because you're shipping continuously to production, shipping is no longer a big deal. So when you need to do a hotfix because of a bug or because of an emergency requirement, you're not scared of shipping. You do it all the time. So shipping is now something that's routine, something that's safe, rather than something that people are nervous about and that is not practiced. So there's a lot of benefits in making sure that you don't just develop in iterative cycles, but those cycles include that last step where you ship out to production. Some more examples here of the principles. The working software is the primary measure of progress, and that's again part of what we mean by shipping to production. It's all about avoiding technical debt. It's about enabling teams to be autonomous, working in small groups, and maximizing their effectiveness. There's another slide here which focuses on how at an organizational level people might think about cloud adoption as not just as a technical project, but as an organizational change, and that covers areas here divided into workload, process, finance, and people. Now, I won't go through the full slide because that's a different topic than the topic we're talking about today. But I've just called out on the slide in the red boxes some of the changes that relate to this idea of moving to an agile model. So we're talking about process changes, moving from waterfall to iterative. We're talking about alignment of business development and operations, bringing those groups together, no longer having a siloed mentality. And we're thinking on the people side there about this cloud mindset. I've talked about that in one of my previous talks. So it's about thinking in a cloudy way rather than legacy IT. So you're thinking about being able to scale things in the cloud, no longer thinking about fixed size servers and fixed costs, being able to be much more adaptable in the way you approach IT, being willing to experiment, being willing to fail fast and move forward rather than having a fear of failure and therefore a very planful waterfall style approach. Okay, so now let's think a little bit around DevOps. And DevOps is really an essential part of this agility. DevOps and agility go hand in hand. So what is DevOps? And there's a definition here from Donovan Brown at Microsoft. DevOps is the union of people, processes, and products to enable continuous delivery of value to our end users. So just to break that down, it's not just people or process or products, it's everything together. It's not just a set of tools, it's not just processes, but it's about these things all coming together to deliver in a fundamentally different way. There's an emphasis here on the continuous delivery. Again, it's about having those small iterative cycles and the value delivered to our end users, not just some internal milestones, but you're delivering out to production, because that's where the value is to the business and for all the reasons I mentioned earlier. So part of the challenge here is that there can be competing goals. So you think from the business's point of view, the business wants to respond to rapidly changing competitive situations, but at the same time provide a stable, reliable and secure service to the customer. And on the development side, obviously the development side, they're trying to build new products and add new features and deal with bug fixes and security updates. All of these things introduce change, but the operations team, they like stability. They want to provide this stable service to the customer. So they want to maximize uptime. And in general, that means minimizing change. They don't like change. So these two requirements from the business, all about the change, that's driving the development to drive new features, but the stability is driving the operations team to be resistant to change. And this creates a conflict. These are competing goals, and it creates a conflict in the organization. It's important to remember at the end of the day, all three teams have one larger goal. It's always important when you have a conflict like this to step back and look up and understand, why are we doing this? And the answer is it's all about happy customers. Everyone is motivated by the same thing. And it's important to draw on that when you're trying to deal with conflicts like this. So historically, how has this worked? Where you have development teams, developing applications and passing off to operations. So historically, the development team and operations team have often had a slightly fractious relationship. So the development team, when there's a problem, might say, oh, well, this is an operations problem. It was something in their environment, their faulty hardware or network configuration. It was something that was a problem in operations. And their view of the operations guy is this grumpy person who always says no. And, it's a little bit finger pointy. Whereas the operations team, they're blaming us. Oh, we're just running code. The bug is in your code and not in our environment. And they assume that any code changes are a risk and will create havoc in their environment. And again, they can be finger pointing the other direction. So it's a broken relationship. That you can get into a terrible negative feedback cycle here. So you can imagine that the ops team, they say no to things, and well, why is that? It's because the service breaks when changes come along, and well, why is that? That's because no one talks to the ops team about the changes. Well, why don't they talk to the ops team? Well, that's because the ops team always say no, and you get into a cycle like this where historical events drive people into these protective behaviors, and that then kills your innovation. Another way to look at the way these things can happen is that you have an over-the-wall model from the development team to the operations team. They hand over the code, they throw the code over the wall, and this really acts as a problem. It leads to these issues we're describing, where the code going over to the operations team perhaps hasn't had the investment needed in operations scenarios. Maybe there are tools that the operations team need to provide support for the applications and to deal with availability issues that the development team are either not respecting or simply not aware of, because they're focused on new features, which is what they're rewarded on. And the operations team is obviously then resentful of the development team for handing them all these problems. So let's think about what DevOps is. And I'm going to start by talking about what DevOps is not. So DevOps is not just a set of tools or processes. You can be using all these tools, but that doesn't mean you're doing DevOps. Tools are a very important part of DevOps, but the tools or set of tools is not going to make, just because you're using those tools doesn't mean you're doing DevOps. And DevOps is not only for startup or cloud companies. It can be used by any company. many organizations can all adopt DevOps, and some been very successfully used in some very large organizations, and been adopted by very well established organizations. It's not only for open source software. Absolutely, DevOps is used for closed source software as well. Many teams in Microsoft Azure work with a DevOps model. DevOps doesn't really replace Agile. Yeah, DevOps practices are compatible with Agile. They really work together with Agile. They are a way of implementing Agile and going beyond the idea that you sometimes have an Agile of potentially shippable code, but taking it to another level and saying things like, okay, we're really going to push things all the way to production. It doesn't necessarily mean that operations teams need to learn how to code. They can still have different roles within a team, and they may be working with different sets of tools than previously, but it doesn't mean that everyone needs to be spending their day staring at C++. And DevOps is not only for the cloud. It can be used in any application, including on-premises applications. And it's not just for small applications either. This can be used in large, complex environments. You look at companies, a lot of these large tech sector companies. Look at Facebook. Look at Amazon. They're delivering massive systems with DevOps agile processes. So let's have a look what DevOps is. So DevOps fundamentally, it integrates development and operations teams. And the clue's in the name there, Dev and Ops. The idea is that you no longer have two teams. If you're still thinking of a devs team and an ops team, well, really you're not doing DevOps. The DevOps, it's one team, and that team is responsible from soup to nuts, as they say, from designing the software to implementing the software, testing the software, deploying the software, operating the same software in production. So they're owning the software from end to end. So when there's a problem, it's the same team owning it from end to end. So that team can choose, is this something that we're going to invest in a fix for? Is this something we need to change our design for? Is this something we're going to change our tooling for? They've got the full scope of potential solutions available to them. So the same team that codes the software, in a way, they feel the pain when there's problems in production, and then they can balance the needs for production investments to make the code run smoothly and to keep the reliability high with the pressure for the new features that the business may be driving. The business is driving for both of those things, as we saw, and now it's one team responsible for both. So you no longer have that tension between the teams. It's one set of people, and they can then have a constructive conversations about how to find that balance. In order to do that, and in order to ship quickly, that will mean investments in automation, whether that's for infrastructure, workflows, and measuring performance, measuring service metrics, whether it's automation of your continuous integration, continuous delivery pipelines across the board in order to move quickly and in order to be able to safely ship regularly to production. That will mean automation, automation, automation. And it's by having these things automated and doing them regularly, you drive down human error, you drive up quality. So let's have a look at some of the core components of DevOps, and they're really broken into these categories. We talk about people, process, and tools, and they should be implemented in that order. If you're starting with trying to create a new DevOps team, you want to think about it: people, process, and then tools. So, because even with the latest tools in place, if the people and the process are not right, then you won't benefit from the DevOps methodology. So let's break each of these down further over the following slides. So look on the people side. The first core component of the DevOps is people, and here the first thing we need to think about is trust. So there are various ways to break down the existing barriers between devs and ops. So we have to get to a place where ops are no longer just saying no, sorry, to what developers are saying. We need to provide developers with access to the environment. Maybe it starts with read-only access, and then we move forward from there. We need dev to talk to ops up front about the work that they're doing. Don't hide ideas and failures and features, and really get those two teams connected together and move towards the stage where you may even merge those teams together and have a single team with full responsibility. When it comes to respect, the dev teams need to remember that someone could be woken up at night if code fails. So let's avoid the finger pointing. Let's look at issues with a constructive mindset and start sharing expertise and sharing background and ideas. And when it comes to communication is really central to having this work. It's about how people communicate. It's about taking a constructive attitude. It's about having a no blame culture when things go right and when things go wrong. When we think about the processes, I won't go through every bullet on the slide, but in general, it's the key word here is automation. It's how do we move towards automating our infrastructure build out? With the cloud, of course, you can move towards infrastructure as code. How do we think about continuous integration and testing so that new code can make its way safely through testing environments and staging environments and production environments in a smooth manner out to production very efficiently and quickly, and be rolled back again if need be? How do we think about performance monitoring and availability monitoring? How do we think about configuration management? How do we use feature flags to turn new features on and off, maybe for particular users? So you can do things like A/B testing in production. You can pilot new features in production for a subset of users, rather than having them sit in separate environments until they're ready to roll out in a waterfall manner. So you're shipping new code into production. It may not be visible to everyone, because of course it can be a challenge if you can't develop every new feature in a week, but you can still deliver it incrementally into production. So it's not visible to everyone, but a pilot set of users can start to use early versions of those features in the production environment as the features develop. And then on the tool side, we can think about some of the challenges here. So here again, we talk about automating our infrastructure. When we think about version control, we should think about the configuration tools maybe used by ops and the code tools used by dev. They should be merged. There should be one shared version control. We should have a single set of processes to build in a single step from the code up to something that's ready to deploy. One step to deploy, fully automated deployment, no week-long multi-step manual deployments, but it should be a fully automated deployment process, and even be able to move to a combined build and deploy. So you have full visibility throughout this as to who did what and when they did it. So you're not losing anything in terms of your control, but you're simply streamlining and enabling these things to become routine rather than rare events that people are afraid of. So you can see here a model of DevOps in action, and the idea here is that starting at the bottom left here, the developers are building the code, they're working away, maybe adding features and bug fixes to the platform. They then pass this up to the code repository as they make their changes, and this is built and deployed out to the test environment, all through automated pipelines. When that build is good, of course, if there are failures in build, this will go back to the code repository. Maybe the code will be rejected. So when things run smoothly, it comes through and gets deployed out into staging environments and then out into the production environment. And then metrics from this system, these are continuously monitored by the DevOps team so that they can monitor and improve the service for the future. These learnings come back into the team and they can make things better. So the benefits of this approach are manifold, but the key thing is that we're going to shorten our cycle times so that we can deliver much more quickly, and it has many side benefits as well in terms of morale for teams and so on. We're going to optimize the resources so that we can be much more efficient in how we're delivering. There's less waste. People from the same size team, you can be a lot more productive, and we're going. And we're going to, in this process, the aim is to improve our quality. Just because we're shipping faster, that doesn't mean we're cutting on testing. We can be testing in a more agile way. We can be shipping faster. And of course, if you ship a bug, it does happen. But in an agile world, you can reverse that bug very quickly. You can roll back a change very quickly. I've seen this happen with services in Azure, where I've experienced a bug and I've been able to reach out to the team and they've given me a fix the next day. So you can turn things around very quickly. Whereas in a non-agile environment, your bug, when it does ship, because it will still happen, but when a bug does ship, it might be either a very expensive process to try and fix that quickly, because you have to really hijack your team and go into emergency mode to get a new release out, a hotfix release. Or it means that the bug is going to sit there for a very long time, annoying your customers before you can get the next routine release out to fix it. So being able to ship more quickly is actually very, very good for quality. Okay, now we've understood a little bit about what DevOps means and the benefits. Let's talk a little bit about how we build a team to deliver in a DevOps model. So Again, a slide we've seen on one of my previous talks, the cloud requires a fundamental shift in culture. And this goes across the organization. It's not simply don't think of the cloud as purely a dev or IT project. It starts with the leadership. The leadership have to set some strategic goals around what they're trying to achieve, and they have to be very clear about the vision that they're proposing and the benefits that they're looking for, because these will drive the behaviors of the other teams. So there's a very important leadership piece here. And they need to make sure that they're creating a supportive culture, not a blame culture. As you make a huge change like the move to the cloud, there will be issues. Things will go wrong, and you cannot fire your way to high availability. People need to be learned. They need to be supported. You need to have a no blame culture as you move forward there. Make sure that people understand the goals, the benefits that you're looking to bring, and the people can then be motivated along the same ways that the business is thinking in terms of the value that they're going to deliver, and that will help make the right decisions throughout each project. On the development teams, people will have to move out of their comfort zones and start doing things in new ways. Obviously, for developers, they may be very nervous of working in an operational environment with the live site, that can affect real customers. That can be a big change for them. Likewise, the IT team, they're going to have to develop new skills. They're going to have to learn, a little bit more about how the development team work and how they can work together in that DevOps model. So the cloud often frees up the IT team to do higher value work and move their value further up the stack. And DevOps is a great way to do that, but that does require the ability to learn and to develop new skills. Just like anyone in IT, no one takes a career in IT and is doing something on day one the same as they're doing 40 years later. So you always need to be moving forward with IT, and the cloud is simply a slight bump in that road where it's an accelerated path. Another cultural change to think about is decentralizing your teams. The Agile model requires a degree of autonomy in your team so they can move quickly. And if you have a very centralized command and control organization structure with manual processes and reviews and sign-offs and gates in your process, then these will form bottlenecks, and they will very much reduce the agility you're able to deliver. So in a decentralized model, your teams are much more autonomous. You still at a central level can provide guardrails and best practices and controls around what those teams can do. But fundamentally, within those guardrails, they need to be able to move at their own pace and not be held back by human manual gates that where they need sign-offs. So, or at least need to keep those to a minimum. So you need to look at how you can decentralize and remove bottlenecks from your processes. It's also a culture change. It's a big change in mindset for people, in particular on the IT side. You can see on the left. So I won't go through it line by line. We go have a detailed presentation on this talk in some of the earlier talks I've given in this series. But you can see this thinking of throwing things over the wall, or command and control, or being told by the business what to do, to moving towards a challenger mentality and using guardrails rather than gates, and using cross-functional teams, enabling people to experiment, fail fast, empowering the teams to move quickly. So these are the culture changes that are essential to delivering in an agile DevOps manner. Now, these changes go far beyond IT. So again, from one of the earlier talks, you need to think about changing your processes. Maybe your project management office needs to be involved in this. You need to think about changing your standards to be cloud friendly. You need to be thinking about finance and governance, so that how do they work? How do they work in a new model here? How do we think about cost management, for example, in an agile world rather than a waterfall? How do we predict what our costs will be? How do we manage costs in an ongoing basis? We need to get the business and IT to work much more closely. The business should be part of these feedback loops where IT is delivering on this rapid cadence. The business should be part of the feedback loop, helping to direct the product, helping to direct new features, giving their feedback, acting as the voice of the customer. And we need to think about the skills people need in order to be successful in these roles. Always a good idea. So let's look at how we actually implement these changes. So it's always a good idea to start thinking about some of your goals and some of the measurable outcomes you might be looking to achieve. I just have some examples on the slide, but of course there are many other goals you might set. And these are obviously setting smart targets here. We're thinking about, the measurable targets on bugs or time on unplanned work. And of course, this only works if you have the maturity to actually measure how your time is being spent, and you're able to measure the time that people are spending on these different types of activities. So we can start with some data that can help you measure when you're being successful and help you understand actually the problems you have from your starting point. And then think about the where you can improve, how you can, where you should start in terms of which applications or projects you should start on. It's a good idea to start looking for some early wins so you can build confidence in the team and gain some visibility for the changes and gain some, executive support for the changes that you're making. So start with a goal that's small enough to be achievable in a reasonable time frame, but also something that's got enough visibility and benefit for the organization. It's not too obscure. So something that people can notice and gain a bit of mind share. So, these human factors are a very important part to getting momentum behind the organizational changes that you're trying to make. You will sometimes be in a Greenfield project or sometimes a Brownfield project. So the Greenfield sometimes appears to be an easier starting point, and it has a good chance of avoiding getting bogged down in legacy issues. But it isn't always an option, and you may sometimes have to start with a Brownfield project and start to evolve it, which I think is a more difficult challenge, but that doesn't mean it can't be done. On a Brownfield project, you can have a bigger impact in a way because the project typically has a greater value to the business up front. Think very carefully about the people that you are going to bring, especially in the very earliest phases of your transformation. You need people who believe in what you're doing, people who already think there's a need to change. They've shown the ability to innovate. They've got respect in the organization. Perhaps they've got agile experience from previous roles. We need people who have a good understanding of the organization and how it operates, how to get things done within the organization. And they've drunk the Kool-Aid. They're committed to the project. They're excited about the project. They're motivated, and they're willing to put in the effort. And they have they share the vision as to where you're trying to go. It's very important to have that motivation. And then think about the KPIs of how you'll measure your successes. So think about, in terms of delivering faster, think about how frequently are you deploying? Are you deploying weekly? Are you deploying every 2 weeks? Are you deploying daily? Think about how quickly you can deploy. Does it take a day? Does it take half a day? Does it take an hour? What's your deployment speed? And then think about your deployment size. When you are actually rolling out the deployments, how much value is each deployment containing? How much in the way of bug fixes or features are being deployed each time around? And think about the lead time. How long does it take for code to go from start to getting deployed? How have you been able to break down those large features into incremental stages that you can deploy piece by piece over a period of time, rather than having everything build up into a large and riskier deployment at the end? Then when you think about efficiency, think about how many servers are your admins able to administer? How many team members do you have compared to your number of customers? Think about the application usage. How many hours of usage does it get? How many requests does it get? Think about the performance of the application. Is it fast? Is it giving the response times that customers are looking for? So various metrics you can look at in terms of how your application and teams are performing. And it's always important to be measuring quality. So think about your failure rates on the deployment side, in terms of bugs that are getting caught in your CI/CD process. Think about your time to detect and time to recover errors that do make it through to production. Think about how many your test pass and test failure rates. Think about achieving your SLAs, your application availability, and so on. So think about these kind of metrics, and depending on the scale of your application, do think about tracking this data over time to see if you are driving these in the right direction, or maybe if you're seeing a problem, you might use these metrics to detect a problem early and think about how you can address it in terms of how people are working. In terms of the culture, you want to think about people's morale and retention. You want to be making sure that you're keeping in touch with your teams, especially if you're running very large teams. Make sure that the changes you're putting in, you're understanding the emotional impact that they can have, and this can be a very difficult change for people on both the development and the operations side. So make sure that you're in touch with those changes and that people have any concerns they have addressed, and you're able to try and keep things moving forward from this point of view. And how you structure your teams, there's various different approaches. The slide shows a horizontal approach where across an application you have a different teams responsible for different layers. You have maybe a UI team and a data team at the bottom. So they're responsible for the various experiences across those tiers of the application. This can work, but traditionally these structures they maybe struggle to scale as your application becomes richer and more has more features. And it requires a lot of coordination across the different layers across the team. So this can create a certain number of problems. Perhaps a better approach is to organize things vertically, where within a particular functional area, a given team owns that function, and they own the code there from the data through the architecture up to the UI. So they have this end-to-end ownership of their feature area, vertically through the stack. And this model extends more easily because you can, when you're adding additional functionality, you can extend out just by adding additional teams. And the idea is to keep the teams small, keep the teams autonomous. It works very well with a microservices architecture where each of these separate components maybe is actually delivered and shipped independently. And because they can be shipped independently, it enables those teams to work in a very decoupled manner and enable them to move in an agile way, move at their own speed, and not be held up by dependencies on other teams. So that's always a good idea. So key aspects for these cross-functional teams is the collaboration. You've got to make sure that you have the right culture around collaboration and the right tools in place. You want to make sure that with a cross-functional team that understands the stack from data through the application up to the UI, when a new feature needs to be done, they no longer have to coordinate. You can just have that small cross-functional team go and deliver that feature end to end. So that can work very well. And you also get diversity of opinions. You'll have within the team, because you have knowledge across the whole stack, you can identify issues at design time rather than having issues surface later because maybe the right people weren't involved at the right time. It also helps disseminate knowledge across the organization, and the teams, because they own the features end to end, they can all take a share of celebrating their successes. They can each point at the feature and say, yes, I was part of the team that delivered that. It's very, very easy to attribute a new feature to the people who are responsible for it. Moving towards the end here, the tools and processes are key. And they can have a big impact on the outcomes you achieve, having the right tools and processes in place. And in many cases, this is all about physical tools, making sure they've got their whiteboards and sticky notes and so on. Don't make people short on those big whiteboards. I have to emphasize, very big whiteboards, and don't skimp on them. Good quality whiteboards that rub out easily. Spend that bit of extra money on top-notch materials for the team, because it's going to save effort. I don't know how much time I've wasted trying to erase baked-in ink from cheap, porous whiteboards. It's a complete time suck, and it's simply a false economy. Think about the tools you have around project management, and make sure you're using an agile tool set there, something that supports the team in what they're doing and doesn't create undue tax on their time. And then, especially for remote teams, make sure you have tools available for screen sharing and creating videos of issues and creating demos of things that are working or not working. Make sure people are skilled up and able to take good advantage of modern tools. There's a whole stack of tools available, both from Microsoft and from others, in terms of how people can collaborate, how people can communicate, and so on. So take a look at some of the tools that are available. That brings us to the end of this talk. So thank you very much for listening. I hope people have found it useful. And just as a final recap, we offer instructor-led training from our expert instructors, virtual and on-site, covering the whole of the Microsoft official curriculum for cloud classes and also advanced classes, including workshops, hackathons, all from our expert instructors. Contact sales@opportunity.com. For online training, we have skillmeup.com, where you can find in-depth videos across the full range of certification paths and far more, hundreds of hands-on labs. We have unique content from our in-house experts, and you can get unlimited access for individuals, teams, or enterprises with a free trial available at skillmeup.com. And for collaborative events and conferences, we have our virtual conference manager, which we're seeing huge growth in business here for virtual conferences and hybrid conferences in the COVID/post-COVID era. And these can be, we're trying to simulate all the benefits of real-world conferences here. So multi-day events, multi-track events, multi-session, hundreds or even thousands of attendees that can be broken up into breakout groups, assigning coaches to different sessions, interactive networking, expo halls for sponsors, and so on. So this is all built on Teams and provides a very powerful platform for organizing Teams-based conferences. So do reach out to us or learn more at govirtualconference.com. My name is Jonathan Tuliani. You've been listening to a Skill Me Up live talk. Thank you very much for listening.